pathetic, the old and the disabled, the very young and women with children were sent to the gas chambers. When slave labor was needed, the young and the able-bodied were admitted into the camp. Their property confiscated, they were branded and sheared, their arms tattooed, and women's hair shaved. They would face selections, the periodic cleansing of the workforce of those unable to keep up. Although the sign at the entrance to Auschwitz I said Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free, the reality of the slave labor camp at Auschwitz, Buna Monowitz, or Auschwitz III is that prisoners were worked until they had nothing left inside. Camp inmates had a word for such a fellow prisoner. They called them Muselmanen, Muslims, who were prostrate. They had given in to despair and were shunned by their fellow inmates, for such despair was infectious. The scent of death, so all-pervasive in the death camps, could rob the few who remained alive of their will to live. Muselmen were sent to the gas chambers to die, and then what was still of value in their bodies was recycled into the war economy. Gold teeth were removed from their mouths and sent to the Reichsbank, and then further into Switzerland to finance the war. The war against the Jews, as Lucy Davidovitz labeled the final solution to the Jewish problem, became an ever more important means of financing World War II. Physicians would preside over such selections, seemingly comfortable in making these life and death decisions. Mengele, the complete story, adds a very important detail. Mengele could perform this task sober. He had no need to deaden his senses or overcome his reservations. He took upon himself this unpleasant task as an act of duty. Few of his fellow physicians could. The scene was too overpowering, too discomforting, their role too compromising. But Mengele was different. Whereas others had to silence their conscience or overcome their role as physicians, Mengele performed his role with the discipline expected of an SS officer. The devil is in the details, the very small details. The large story is known, but in the intimacy of a gesture or a deed, the character of a man is revealed. Thus, we read that as he hastily evacuated Auschwitz along with other German officers, Mengele collected his data, the carefully chronicled results of his work at Auschwitz. He thought that these experiments would be the key to his fame and prominence in the outside world. He kept this data with him, even in hiding, even at a time when their revelations would have doomed him to a trial and near certain punishment by death. When he most feared capture, he entrusted this material briefly to a nurse with whom he had been intimate, but he sought to retrieve this material prior to his departure to Latin America, even though the notes could betray him. To the very end, he thought of himself as a scientist whose studies of eugenics were legitimate science, appropriate to the medical profession, and he continued to believe in German racial supremacy and in the rules of his science. His dream was grand, the improvement of the human species, the dominance of the master race skillfully improved by applied biology. Nazism attracted such men. It cultivated and promoted such scientists. It gave them the opportunity to practice such medicine uninhibited by the normal constraints of accepted medical practice. Josef Mengele, M.D., Ph.D., had been trained by such a master. Dr. Ottmar Freiherr von Verschuer, an outspoken admirer of Adolf Hitler, whom he considered the first statesman to recognize the true importance of hereditary biology and race hygiene. Von Verschuer was to head the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology, Human Hereditary Teaching, and Genetics in Berlin. He was a mentor to the young physician, bringing him from the Russian front to Berlin to further his research.